Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Traveling Mollies. My name's Al DeGenova, and I'm with my host Nina Corwin tonight. Tonight, our
Welcome
featured
back.
yeah,
Welcome
tonight our
back.
featured readers are Mike Bazzett and Nick Gulig, and we have a whole host of open mic readers tonight. Nina Corwin's going to start. Nina, it's up to you.
Yes, so I'm doing the honors. We start the poetry with Al and I, and so I'm going to start. And this one is called Right Tool, Right Time, um, with a uh, with the with the Boy Scout motto, be prepared. And we're going to need to be prepared for anything pretty soon. Um, so I'm going to start. Right tool, right time. Two. Oh, one. It's a Boy Scout moment, if ever there was one. Goliath, the high-rise developer, David, the owner of a lowly bodega about to be steamrolled. Forget about slingshots, brother. Those 5 smooth stones. Where is the heavy artillery when you need it? Two. Give me a missile, I'll give you a mop. Somebody's got to clean up. Humpty Dumpty, for example, as if there weren't collateral damage enough. Someone forgets to bring the glue, and soon all the king's men are firing salvos of blame from their pointed fingers, a little egg on every face. Three. A new machine arrives at the bank, and Karen's never felt so redundant. One day it's an ATM, the next a touch-tone phone. Press star, and Billie Holiday sings Them That's Got Shall Get. Press pound, and it's the Grapes of Wrath all over again. Now Karen's back on the bread line. She wants to know who to shoot, but progress is wearing a bulletproof vest. Four. The recovering addict hangs up his syringe. He tells his 12-step group, if a hammer is your only fix, you better hope your only problem is a nail. Pete Seeger sings, if I had a hammer, I'd hammer out danger, but he has no hammer, so he keeps on singing. Thanks.
Hmm.
So, Al, what do you got?
Thank you, Nina. I have a brand new poem, so let's try it out. Sometimes you never know where these things come from, of course. This is called Attempting Repentance. In my new front lawn, a circle of bricks forms a fire pit used by the previous owner to burn garbage. The ash now a solid black lump, I break apart with a sharp-edged shovel, slowly filling plastic construction bags. There are charred cans, melted plastic, metal couch cushion springs. I'm asking why and who when I dig out a white glass figurine. A baby Jesus in his manger, a discarded creche piece. I hold it, clean it with my thumb, hear the whisper of a long ago nun, can't throw it away. All these layers of burning, of ash and years between me with my shovel and the soft sand beneath the burnt earth. How much I've discarded those loosed embraces, pages of remembering buried in my darkness. Brown stalks and dry flower pots line the windowsill. The unblemished figurine waits alone, no warmth from shepherds or oxen or sunflowers. I know I have not yet wept enough. So thank you.
Al, that seriously kicks ass.
Well, I didn't want to start with that one. So you got to go first.
Why not?
So,
Why not?
um, tonight, let's open the open mic. Um, How about with Pablo?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, that was a beautiful poem. Um, so these are scary times, so I'll give you two scary poems. And one you will have already heard because I'm gonna keep reading it until after Jules. You wake up for Gregor Samson. You wake up and one day you are a vermin and your brother and he loses his job and can't get out of bed. And you wake up walking across a desert, a checkpoint for vermin. A dangerous fool reads a book to a crowd that you are snakes, that your family should die in a river or under a house, or they say you are rats. You wake up stateless against a wall or a fence. They throw apples at your wounded body while it's a nice day. Turn off this. Thank you. And this one is through a thin veil. I don't know how to turn off this thing and use it at the same time. Sorry. Through a thin veil. Language, a river valley and 10,000 stories. An owl oods through the night. The birds telling stories. It's hard not to be here, the sky not broken, and know they catch each other, destruction midair, like bees exploding. Birders have argued if you can know a bird by hearing its call alone. Language. We can't feel the night air, and 600 people died the other day. But you can't mourn 600, nor those 4,014, 40,000 bodies. Now is not the time to hold a day of mourning for the massacre of Fallujah, the massacre of Gaza. If I could trust you not to give Caligula a scepter and a blowtorch, at the end of the Republic, you vote for Joffrey, for Biff. The 100-Day Massacre of Gaza, the massacre of Lebanon, a river valley, the sky not broken, by two eagles' talons on talons, ballistic, the birds telling stories. Through a thin veil we bury the fruit of our industry, war, a primary.
Nina, are you joining
I'm
us?
sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was so busy about to write a note. So why don't we next have Robbie Nestor? Robbie.
And now for something completely different. Can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Of
Okay.
course, yes.
So let me, I'm sorry, this is going to take a minute. I'll start with when I did. Okay, share. Evokes a flightless angel, complete with harp. Seen differently, the curved bottom of the banister could be a workman hauling something heavy, or a bent old man leaning on his wooden staff. Further up, at the long flight's turn, his grandchild prepares to slide down, most likely about to knock the old guy down. The curved lines, the boy's leg thrown over one railing, give the sense of instability where there is none, making the piece kinetic, like the valves of a saxophone or trumpet amplifying sound. Something always about to happen. Any moment we expect to hear a whoop. And that was inspired by forged sculpture by Libor Herta. You never know what you're going to see on face now. Okay, and my next one. What He Collected After the Dream by Henri Rousseau. In his job as customs man, Rousseau appraised curiosities from everywhere, learning in the process about cultures he never otherwise experienced. Except in the halls of a museum, he had not explored the ruins of the ancient world or trekked a jungle. Yet he absorbed these wonders from the pages of encyclopedias, studied all the shades and shapes of green in botanical gardens, observed exotic beasts behind the bars of cages at the zoo. He made note of all this in his paintings, where ancient Egyptian lotuses rise like fans over a European odalisque, with her companion brace of lionesses, diminutive shy elephant, a world lit from within by imagination's light. The eye follows the divan's curved line, hand extended to the crouched lion's angled end of a snake, all in the same sinuous curve. Bright fruit hangs overhead. The woman is at once Eve and the Egyptian goddess Hathor, consort of the sun god, muse, creator, and destroyer, bridge to other worlds. She is a hieroglyph, encoding whole cosmologies, aesthetics. In the center of the frame, yet still somehow invisible, a green-faced guard fades into leafy shadows, serenades her in this monument to colonial collections, the kind of flute.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Robbie. How about Susan Messer, it's been so long since we've heard from you. How about, what do you got?
I have 4 tiny love stories. These are love stories. Each one has to be under 100 words, so I'm into compression. So here they are. In a Zoom gathering, a friend described being at a grocery store where he became tearful at noticing the abundance besides the vulnerability. And later, I walked to our farmer's market where I saw what he meant. A group of musicians began a John Denver song. Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine. And it all came together in a big, tearful whoosh. I know I had heard that song when I was young and found it corny, but at that moment, it went to my heart and I sang those words for weeks. Okay. I first saw my future husband standing at a buffet table during a training conference. He'd gone back for seconds on the manicotti and found one piece left. Scanning the room, he asked, "Does anyone else want this?" As he saw me across the room and had the warm sense that he knew me. For years, I nodded along until one confessional day, I revealed what I'd been thinking at the time, which was, just shut up and take the manicotti. My mother died of a heart attack, all in one day that began with her tap dance aerobics class and ended that evening in a hospital bed. In the following days, my sisters and I traveled to Detroit to be with our father. Among the many stunned thoughts we shared, my father mentioned a special, deep goodbye gaze in her eyes when she left that morning. Many years have passed since that day that I have relived again and again, but only recently did someone say to me that to die tap dancing sounded like a great way to go. Okay, the last one. I once led a workshop where I asked people to consider this question. Of all your identities, which would you, why that one? Most agreed it was a challenging question. And when it came to my turn, I said writer, because I had worked so hard to feel I'd earned that title. Now, however, 1 year after that workshop, if I ever face that question again, I think I will say mortal human, because at age 75, that is what seems to matter most of all.
Wonderful, wonderful. Who was it that was Patty? It said this was a great prompt, or that was Robbie. It is.
Yeah, I was proud of it. Yeah. Others are welcome to try it. It was a wonderful discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. I thought of it all by myself.
Actually, I was thinking about the idea of doing 100-word love stories.
Oh, well, that's from the New York Times. They have a feature called Tiny Love Stories, and they have to be under 100 words. That's what inspired me.
Yeah. So what about Patrick Reardon? Patrick, let's
Hello,
hear
everybody.
from you.
I've got two poems, a series of poems that I've done with three characters, myself, composite of all the guys I play basketball against, and then Little Sister, who is based on Teresa of Lisieux, who was this little nun in France who was quite a character. I mean, quite a deep spiritual presence. Anyway, this is In Her Pain, Brother Elbow and Little Sister poem number 7. This just appeared in Commonweal magazine this month. In Her Pain. We sit with Trump enthusiasts, Elbow, Sister, and I. Oh, Elbow, calm down. Sister knows they're hard shelling, and underneath darkness, deep and deeper. In that gloom, they have been spewed with bile, fountained by vomit. They have tribal protection, struck out as they have been struck, spittled. We sit at their table, our table, breathe the bitter air, acrid touch. Look, on Clark Street, middle-aged boys walk hand in hand, dating by sidewalk, having fought off the bile. Little sister fought off the venom voices, her own. Under MAGA hat, the woman coaches Little League well. She passengers the lost, cold, thin man, thin coat, outside the church in snow after midnight mass, drives him where he needs to be. In her pain, she reaches for illogic when logic has betrayed. In calm moments, she sings, not out of tune, as sweet as the music of any other saint or sinner. And the other one is part of a series that I've started where I'm using Black spirituals as sort of inspiration. Excuse me. So this one is called Empty, Variations on Black Spirituals, number 14. This is, my brother committed suicide 9 years ago, and he keeps appearing in poems of mine. So he's very much in this one. So this is called Empty. He was 64, blonde and gray and bearded, and he had lines of metal in his back and lines of pain in his shoulders and hips, and all his life, his back. Land of Egypt, dying lamb. He was my brother that night, but not anymore. A few hours later, in the rain, snow, in his backyard. Come down. Now he is the empty space at the table across from me, the empty air his angry shouting once filled, the empty spacing where this and that connection link no longer, where the sound of chaos ends at the edges, where he sits before me, empty and demanding and accusing, and I followed the lines of investigation to the way he stuttered and why. Set free, come back to me. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that one, Patrick. Nice. How about Patricia McMillan? Are you ready? Patty, good to see you.
I am. Thank you. I have two poems. One, because Pablo reminded me I haven't read this or looked at it in almost 15 years. So it's called On Watching an Oprah Rerun at Night. What do payphones, playground swings and slides, the steering wheels of children's 10-cent rides in front of megastores, and pop machines all have in common? Oprahs with verite clips of field tests. They use clean latex gloves and cotton swabs to prove how the whole world's awash in E. coli and fecal bacteria. Oprah says, buy bottled water, bring baby wipes, don't breathe too deeply, spread newspaper on the seats of trains and taxis. Better yet, stay home. No brand names, please. She'll get calls. More to come. And thank you. This is a very recent one. This is its premiere. And it's one of those ones that the title runs into the first line. So the title is For Months, Years. For months, years, decades, you hate your body, its insistently empty womb, its puffy midsection, its bouncing jugs, its hormone-laden blood. Then you hate the entire town, the neighbors whose children have hit high school and say they need resume material, so you have no choice but to hire them to file, cook, walk the compensatory dog, pull weeds in the side yard, sitting on their skateboard in outsized headphones practicing beatbox. Then off they go, those kids, and instantly they are back offering to redeploy your retirement savings in Bitcoin and insisting you use third-person plural to refer to their friends of unknown or unwanted gender. You feel ambushed when their young rabbi calls you an empty nester, lumps you in with their aging parents, yet you keep trying to admire their lip piercings, their jello-colored hair and tattoos, even the ones they already say they regret, their new Scandinavian baby carriers. And once you've struggled for a few months, years, decades, there becomes easier to remember than Zir, and you accept the sufficiency of being a perennial flower, even if not a tomato planting tree. Thank you.
All right, that was nice. I'd like to have Leah Graham read. And Leah, you have a new book, right?
I have 3 new books coming out in 2025. Yes, I have a new book. The OED Odes is coming out, so I'm going to read from that. But I do have a chapbook coming out through Finishing Line, and I have also an edited collection with Celia Bland on the work of Maxine Chernoff. So sorry for the plug. I know it's ugly, but there it is after all these years of work. So there you go. So the thing that I should tell you is that in the OED Odes are just words and the definition. So I'm going to start with this one. Since so many people are reading Trump poems, I think this is a good one to start with. This is called Spell. Set of words, a formula or verse supposed to possess magical powers, a charm or incantation, a period or space of time of indefinite length. And this is upon hearing that Salman Rushdie and Donald Trump sat next to each other at a Crosby, Stills, and Nash concert. Kids at the garden. No memory of being in hiding anything. They sing along. Who knew Sal could harmonize with Nash, or that Don knows every word to Woodstock? Side by side, these two guys, children of God, here to lose the smog. A moment in stardust, this brief golden thrall. And thanks. And the second one I'll read has to do with it's a travel poem, really, and it has to do with I was in Buenos Aires with my husband back in 2018, and so the little bit that you should know is that his grandparents fled Vienna when Hitler marched in. So with his father, who was 4, and his uncle Paul, who was a baby. So you should know that. And I swear to you all, I told him I was taking him to what was at one point like a naval base, a training school that turned into a place where they disappeared people. And I told him that, but he didn't really hear me. So this is kind of, about that. And it's also sort of just about language and the absurdity of what language looks like and what it means and that sort of thing. So this is called delitos, which in Spanish means crimes. Escuela Superior Mecánica de la Armada, Buenos Aires, August 8th, 2018. 1. Hard to resist the word's resemblance to delights, but knowing it can't be. I look it up after reading it over and over on plaques stationed here and there in this naval base turned detention center. Bare except for the faces stenciled across walls, blurbs about terror, death flights, bodies washing up in the Rio de la Plata. In the one building we enter, Portraits of the Plaza del Mayo mothers order the hallway. Birth dates embroidered into their white scarves. They present children's photos in a mute show and tell. We emerge to sky's canopy, a hint of rain, gaze up at monk parakeets and hoop pines, their nests cylindrical baskets like something we might buy in a tourist market. You tell me you didn't know I was taking you here after the art museum. Didn't know. I say I told you. You don't listen. And we almost fight, but then go outside the gates to sit on a curb and cry. 2, you're forever at that window in Vienna watching them parade into 1938, what was called Anschluss, joining, or Blumenkrieg, the War of the Flowers. Later in Seattle, your grandmother naming her parakeet Franz Joseph, because she said, he was always so good to us. 3, headed for San Telmo, searching out tango, our cab driver drums the wheel and sings to 80s hits. Ring my bell, and how will I know? Super freak, and where the streets have no name. We pass statue after statue of men on horses, men dressed for war. You practice reading in Spanish, joke about names of restaurants, Kentucky Pizza and Louisiana Fried Chicken, next to the Center for the Deported. What irony, you tell me. I say no. El Centro del Deportivos is just a sports arena. Thanks.
Thank you, Leah, and congratulations on all those publications.
Yeah, I mean, you all know, like it's years and years, and then all of a sudden it all comes out. You know what I mean.
So next, I'd like to ask John Simmons to read for us, away from Hawaii.
Hi, Al and Nina and Bill. Good to be here. It's been about 7 months, and in that time I turned 89. So among other events that have occurred, this is a short poem, and it's response to an ekphrastic photograph, color photograph of safety cones, and it's influenced a little bit in a very weird way by William Blake, and the title is Lamps Unto Our Wheels. The cone of safety holds our new salvation, a tiger-like glow that guides us. That's Tyger, a tiger-like glow that guides us, catching bright day or night, orange with fluorescent yellow, white, considerably in focus on lanes and boundaries marked for direction and delineation, a defining discipline of striped objects lined as pickets, spangled in formation, talismans of faith on sentry duty, or intermittent barrel shapes webbed by interlacing caution tapes. The occasion of danger lies not far from a mishandled wheel, a misread reflection, or road sign distraction, as quick flash messages clash with road paint arrows, boldly white and pointing elsewhere, or as cat's-eyed glints of tiny cleats draw our vision toward points where barricades block the road. Sacred objects comfort fright on darkened roadbeds of the night. What immortal hand or eye set these hallowed lamps to keep us moving in their safe path sights? Dim confusion also post the beacons for our course correction? Thanks very much.
All right, thank you. And couple of announcements. One of them is that next month we're going to have Nicole Callahan and Ahi Lee. And I'm looking forward to hearing from them. And also, this has to do with passing the hat, give our poets money. And we never seem to be able to give them as much as they deserve. But we're going to try. So Al is going to drop a link in the chat to the donate button in his after hours journal site. And we promise that money will get divided between the two features. So please do that, but also buy the poets' books. It's as much a gift to them as it'll be to you to get their books, and I know that they're just beautiful. So yeah, that's the commercial part. And now, why don't we hear something from Sarah Ray? Sarah.
Okay, thanks everybody. Hey, great to be here. Great to see people that I haven't seen in a while. So nice to be back. I'm going to read two. I might have read this first one previously, so if you've heard it before, sorry, you'll have to hear it again. But I truly can't remember. But I was here this year, March 8th, and so this came as a result. On a Friday in March, I'm in Mexico, in Oaxaca, at the Mayordomo restaurant. When I hear them coming, chanting, cheering as they make their way through the square, I see them from the restaurant's balcony, this river of women in purple, white, and green, in street clothes and traditional huipiles from all backgrounds, straight, queer, trans women and their supporters, coming past the gray stone buildings, the banks, the cathedrals, government offices, flowing onward, shouting, no se va a caer, lo vamos a tirar. It's not going to fall. We're going to tear it down. We're going to throw it away. They are talking about the domestic abuse, the sexual abuse, the femicide, the patriarchy that is all too slow to persecute, the statistics that have more than doubled since 2015, women serially killed, those murdered by their partners, the number of women who have disappeared, one every 2 hours, the statistics say. In this country that is ironically due to elect its first female president, placards of the candidates adorn the walls, and now the protesters hang posters of the victims alongside. They shout their names: Diana, Ingrid, Abril, Mariana, Fatima, Mariela, Debani, Claudia, Laura, Valeria, Noemi. They carry posters with the words of Audre Lorde, the English translated to Spanish: no seré libre mientras otra mujer no sea libre, incluso si sus grietas son diferentes que los míos. I will not be free if another woman is not free, even if her shackles are different than mine. They keep marching, marching, marching. We keep marching, marching, marching. Okay, thank you. Thanks. So this next one is very different in tone, very new. very new, just working on it today. It's inspired by and also written in response to James Wright's poem, Lying in a Hammock at William Duffy's Farm in Pine Island, Minnesota. It's called Sitting at an Outside Table at Essentia Urban Kitchen, corner of Clark and Roscoe, Chicago, Illinois. The breeze, just cool enough, licks deliciously on my skin as midday sun cleanses me golden. I'm eating enchiladas, mole poblano with chicken, green infused rice, purple onion bits atop. Coffee blooms in my throat, the blue of the mailbox, the bus stop in front of me, the rainbow colors pulse at the church along the sidewalk across the street, red, yellow, green. A large flower pot looms behind me, vibrating pink and purple, scarlet tinged with gold. I see it before me now, the reflection on the window glass in front. Which is real, the vision ahead or the artifact behind? A fearless squirrel ventures towards my table, reaching out its limbs for sustenance. A train wails in the distance, beckoning me back to my roots, to my childhood. I am ringed by flowers, by purple, pink, red, blue, green. The colors thread through my hair. Everything in my to this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, let's hear from Caroline Wellman. Good to see you.
Oh,
You're still muted, Sarah, Caroline.
all right. Okay. So I've got a couple of poems. This one began a few years ago as a very long, tedious narrative poem, and a couple of people said this doesn't work, so I abandoned it. But this is a kind of a new version of it that just recently came to me, and hopefully this one works. All I know is it's really been insisting on itself lately, at the most inconvenient times. But this is called Electra. Morning becomes the reason to shear off my hair, push all my jewelry aside, wear my father's old clothes. Becomes the way I walk the empty streets by day, passing the taverns where revelers feast and drink unmasked, their banners declaring my rights don't end where your fear begins. Morning becomes the memory of him walking into the hospital, the other men behind him, to give blood for a dying child. Becomes all the weekends they sandbag the levee with six-packs and homemade food, with jokes and songs, sunburned and elated. Morning becomes all the nights I know his love was wasted here, where so many are still locked away to die while leaders laugh. Morning becomes my tears hijack a sudden moment by my silence after each vaccine, becomes an axe hacking into my trunk, becomes a vengeance sworn, a vow I have written into my bones. So this is the first poem I've ever written about the job I have now, which I guess in January I'll have had it for 4 years now. But I work for the Postal Service, and those of us who work inside the building, each of us has on our schedule something called a late day, where we come in a little later than usual. And usually, if you're, this is about one of my recent late days. It's called working the late shift on a Saturday at the post office. Moving mail out for the 5 p.m. truck, I find a box of cremated remains, which should have gone out the previous day, sitting atop packages meant for other towns. And then I hear myself mutter, "Damn it, this is somebody's family." I slip the white box into its own blue and gold bag, buckle it, put the orange label on, and find a plastic tub to place it in on the gray concrete floor, next to the door where the truck will pull in. Then I just stand a few minutes in the thick, humid silence under the stark fluorescent lamps, just as I did the first time I ever saw remains here, my father newly gone, my mother a bright star above me. Strangers are waiting. The family has sat in an office to make its plans for what will happen next. All of us are doing time beside urns and caskets, and will again far too soon. And I wish it made us better. Thank you.
That line, my rights don't end where your fears begin, was that a quote from someone?
Yeah, that is that's literally a quote from so I moved back here in October of 2020, and COVID's on, right? But yeah, there was a tavern downtown, and it's only recently since it's gotten new ownership that banner has disappeared. It was outside there in big block letters for the longest time. Yeah, and I would drive downtown to a CrossFit class and come back and see all these people, sitting around, crowded around their tables, everybody carrying on, no mask, no nothing, and then 5 weeks later I lost my dad to it. So yeah, it's yeah. Yeah, it was a real banner. It was a real quote. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Before I ask Kurt Heinz to wrap up the open mic, I just want to invite people in the audience or anywhere. If you want to be in the open mic, what we do is we pick names from a hat, metaphorically speaking, but drop us a line at our Facebook group at Traveling Molly's Open Mic and Literary Series or something like that. And or if you happen to know Al or my email, just drop us a line a week or two before the open mic. So we're always on the second Monday of the month. So Kurt Heinz, it's so good to
It's
see
great
you.
to see you too, Nina. And it's great to see Sarah Ray. Interesting that she should be on here with me tonight, because she and I were at the Aurora Writers Workshop in June. And yeah, see a thumbs up from her on that one, yay. And Donna Varere asked us to try writing a golden shovel. And it was a wonderful experience. She stipulated two things. First of all, she gave us some sample lines to work with. In this case, it was from Peter Gabriel's "In Your Eyes." The line is, "In your eyes, I see the doorways to a thousand churches, the resolution of all my fruitless searches." That was a seed to go on. The second stipulation was, and this is going to sound, that song was sung at my wedding. And Nina, I think you saw that. But what came out of me isn't exactly the warmest love, but it's there. And I hope you can appreciate it. This is the first time it's getting a full reading, so since that. And I don't think I did a full reading at the Donna Varere's workshop, so here we go. When it came time to put Mom in an old folks' home, we knew she wouldn't like it. It wasn't your home where she could push you around with just her eyes. I imagined all this in those calls when you and I left her place. To me, it was writ large. See, she didn't have to push, but she did it anyway. The charming sentiments and not 10 minutes of us out of her doorways. And then your phone rang. Why? To thank us for visiting? Really? A story about losing but loving anyway was there. Not 1,000 notes of gratitude, but compulsory churches in which we dutifully prayed, paid homage to the will and resolution of all that power she thought she still had over her world, all that control of us, her kids. She had already started losing it. My hope for her was so fruitless. And she, always seeking something she can't name, still searches. It's unusual for me. Thank you. It's unusual for me to write to form like that, but I really enjoyed that. And thank you, Donna Vorere, for prompting us. This is also a form piece, but it's about 19 years old. It's written for Ken Hunt, who is a poet we knew in Chicago decades ago, and I'm still remembering. Excuse me. On the 17th of March, I wake up to clock radio, Susan Stamberg and Gene Wilder talking about young Frankenstein, or that's Frankenstein, and how the good doctor reanimated a mass of lifeless tissue into a suave and sophisticated man about town who is putting on the wrists. I laugh uncontrollably and I'm late for my bus. On the 19th of March, Congress and the president fly in from all over just to write and pass an unconstitutional bill to keep a single, humble woman in Florida alive with tubes and wires, whose worth has become pure political capital and little else beyond the feuding family's sentiments. Heroics at the stroke of a pen. What a fiat, I envy. How political will foretells death itself. The woman dies 2 weeks later amid flailing, impotent injunctions on you stay. On the 20th of March, the emails and voicemails pile up as our own revelations about you do too. Mysteries about the cause still to unravel. Were you jumped, stalked, bashed, seized, merely fall? But we suppose that will end soon, like always. On the 21st of March at 11:06 a.m., I feel gravity change. I feel like someone for a moment is sharing my eyes. I'm doing a very ordinary thing. I am watering my plants where I work. I feel like life as well. It's a comfortable laugh. It's happy. No rue, little irony, simple, lighter, lighter, lighter. By 6 p.m., I know you officially passed at 10:28 a.m. These words, coarse suture. We who knew you can reanimate a monster of you and your deeds of all kinds, laughing and ejaculating, swinging arms and deaf signs, screaming slogans and noise, devastating us with pleasure and self-neglect in a disorganized saga. We knew you by 5 or 6 bynames, one for each chimera of your ego or id, and you got away with taunting God before us, leaving your own unpronounceable endearments for age 40, 50, 60, what you wouldn't touch, and on and on. That never meant we'd forget you. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Kurt. Knew you'd be a great cleanup hitter.
You're welcome.
here tonight.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate that. Hitter in this, but it's an honor, sir. Believe me.
so thank you, everyone, in the open mic. I'm going to hand out and bring up our features.
Yeah, well, I am. We're ready to go after a wonderful open mic. We start with Nick Gulig and then Michael Bazzett, and then I can't wait to see what where the conversation goes after the readings. In the interest of time, I'm going to try to shorten these lengthy bios because these guys have done so much. Nick Gulig is a Thai-American poet from Wisconsin. He is currently the poet laureate of Wisconsin, which is major. He's the author of Orient at Cleveland State University. I'm going to rush through this stuff. Winner of the 2017 CSU Poetry. Boy, this is a lot. Book of Lake on Yes, Yes Books. He's the recipient of a Fulbright Fellowship, which took him to Bangkok, and a whole bunch of awards, but I'll mention the Black Warrior Review Poetry Prize. He's, just because I love that journal, he's an associate professor at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, and received in 2023 an Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellowship, which he will soon hand off to somebody, and will probably have his life back again. Because along with the honor comes a whole lot of work. The next book, The Other Altar, won the Colorado Poetry Prize. It's forthcoming this November, and let's listen. Nick.
Thanks for having me. The book actually just showed up this week, so I just got it, and I think what I'm going to do for the next 15 minutes or so, just float around in the book. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to read from the book as a book. I mean, I've read some of these poems before they were part of this thing, but I'm still pretty smitten. I think maybe smitten is the right word. I'm just happy to have this book here. So thanks for having me. Thanks for all of y'all for reading with me, and thanks in advance for Michael for reading with me also. Maybe we'll start at the beginning. I'm going to read the first poem in the book. It's called Preface. Recently, my eyes have started, the garden darkening, the sort of the evening darkening. It is getting difficult to tell exactly. The silence of another morning turns the inscape of my utterance to prayer, and fled again the name behind the song that causes it. Is there an altar here? And noise the field the light records. Since Michael's a second language, but I did take a translation class as a PhD student with Laird Hunt. I don't know if folks know Laird Hunt's work. He's an incredible novelist, and we were having a discussion about experimental translations, and he gave us an assignment to go perform an experimental translation and bring the translation back to the class, in a couple of weeks, and then we would talk about it. And I was reading Julie Carr's, if folks know the poet Julie Carr, I was reading Julie Carr's book of poems, 100 Notes on Violence, which is an incredible book, and I was completely in love with it at the time. And so I thought I would go translate Julie's book, which involved I decided I wanted to destroy the book as a form of translation and see what would exist after the destruction of the book. And so I called my friend Andrew on the phone, and Andrew is from Alabama, and so most of my poet friends didn't own guns, but Andrew he had a shotgun, and he did, and he was a farrier, so he worked out in the hills of Colorado. And so he asked one of his clients if we could go shoot guns in their field, and the client was like, "Yeah, of course." And as one in Colorado does, and so we took Julie's book out into the field, and we spent the afternoon shooting Julie's book with a shotgun. And this really magical thing happens to a book when you shoot it. I found out, and it opens first and foremost. And the reason that it opens is because when the pellets perforate the pages, the exit wounds fray, and so the little frayed edges kind of push the pages open. And so as we shot it, the book kind of opened all over the ground, like little bits and pieces of words and individual words, and there are all these kind of wonderful absences in the text once we had spent the afternoon shooting it. And I the book turned into this really incredible object. And I remember I brought it back to Laird's class, and I was like, "Look, Laird, I shot this book for your translation class." And he was like, "Oh, great job," and we talked. An email from Julie, and Laird had written her and said, "Hey, Julie, I thought you might be interested in this. And one of my students shot up your book for my translation class." And she emailed me and asked if she could have the book. And I said, "Of course." And so I sent it off. I mailed it off to her. And then about a year later, her next book came out, and the next book was called "Someone Shot My Book." And so that's kind of like my claim to fame. I was really, really, really honored. So this is called Book of Weaponry for Julie Carr. Once I held a stranger's rifle in my hand and walked alone into a moving field of switchgrass, a sea of dead machinery abandoned at the edges in the light. In the center of the field, I propped a book I loved against a tree stump. The wind rose up, the pages turned and stopped. It was not unusual. The far hills glinting silver, the book was there. Believing in my name, its porous order, I picked the weapon up and faced I did this, a world within the world that I imagined brightening, in the vibrant aftermath of violence. The noise of forms reorganized, sent back to me in drifts. Over and over, the book turned back into a flower. The hills became themselves beyond themselves. The field bloomed up around me like an empire. Endling. This is in five parts. Endling. Even now, there's no escaping it. The landscape opens in a book I haven't written, and utterance retreats upon a path of gravel leading backward through the suburbs. One must try again and cannot say it. In the long dilapidation after tragedy, it is difficult to render the blue stairs ascending slowly in a mind whose body bends to noises, a poisoned mathematics in the bone. One must weigh their name against the muffled sound of others. Thus the restless violence of the margins, and thus again the page. 2. Lukewarm and capable of love, I have not invented music. The sound I make is that which overwhelms the prospect of a laugh. Every morning I try and fail to name the singer after my name. One is told of nothing. 3. Because the moon tonight above the riots is the color of bad cocaine, the incongruent wealth the sky pretends is only partially visible, and the world remains a word whose synonym is born. All hail the bright emergence of these events, the stalled philosophies, the aesthetics common to the cathedrals of the 14th century. In prose, it grows difficult to fertilize a purpose. Among the blooming fragments of my youth, my face is faint and docile. Octagons connect against the distance, parallelograms of stars. Their imperfect reticence surrounding even he, the man whose face is colony, passing through me like a hiss. 4. The noise of light I notice most surrounding each of us amounts to an emasculated nighttime sky. Memory is plastic, lukewarm. What is happiness? What are stars? Blinking back the dust, a different empathy replaces the incapacitated structure of our care. This is better oxygen. The city burning in the distance splits its inconsistent light against the desperate whiteness of a politics. Here in the here, I place my failing language in a wood stove. A new September reddens in the molten center of the old. 5. Without the risk of self-exposure, without apology or circumstance or ache, the laurels upon which rest the dormant struggle of the leaves this autumn in a place I didn't choose to live in. Their irrelevance and awkward grace, a patchwork covering of yellows. In the sea of dying grass that trims the yard around my house, I hold my daughter's hand as though it were an anthem. Aberrant cacophony, death of the pastoral. Every time she picks a flower up and drops it, the petals spool into their shadows. We name them, everything we've lost returns to us. We press our ears against the ground and listen. We hear the blue-black bark of capital. All right, I'll read two more. One short, one a little bit longer. This one is called Destroyer. Somebody says yes. Not a soul bright star, blurred by breath. Chances are the world's what's ever offered inward where it's worth. A word within a word, but what surrounds it. No matter, whatever is sure to skip a beat beyond my reason. The center spills too deep. The still far, maybe beauty of the day. Here is where the world of things becomes impossible. The wrung out speech thread hanging loosely like a tooth root. Unsubtractable and scattered. Is it true our hollows coalesce? A nest of inner endings ending over in the unlit, threadbare terrors of our room. We abandon everything, and yet the space between us blossoms outward like a zero opening its mouth to swallow. That I have said to you, I need you. That you have said, I'm here. And then I think I'll close with this one more poem. It's called Book of Difference. And there's like 3 of these poems in the collection where I'm kind of trying to like weave like a variety of stories together, a bunch of different narratives. And you'll recognize one of the narratives is again like the shooting of Julie's book. One is about my dad dying. One of the narratives is about the shootings, mass shooting in Buffalo. And another one is a kind of critical engagement with the work of the poet George Oppen. Book of Difference. I write the book a second time, I shoot it. When my father dies, I leave the room and stand alone at the end of a long hall, looking down on Minnesota. I know of no other happiness, writes Oppen, but the mind rising into what is there. It's summer in the Middle West, and 10 are dead in Buffalo. I call a friend and weep into the telephone. A field of knee-high grass surrounds me. I lay the book against a tree stump. Confronted by police, the shooter removes his armor in a fluid motion close to Grace. The hall is empty. He sets his weapon briefly against his chin and then surrenders. The switchgrass sways. Every time I stare along the rifle's spine and pull the trigger, buckshot scatters in the bright light. The pages separate. The book begins to pull itself apart. And the racist human, like my wife, children, like my children, stand to disenfranchise white men. Drop in the failure of language to be transparent is a failure to move beyond the shipwreck of the singular, a falling short of love. I used to think there was no one I loved the way I loved my dad, but then I had a daughter. At night, I light a candle and tell his ghost I'm sorry. The echo of a gunshot slants against the hills. The book begins to blossom. Although his actions resonate beyond the single moment of their occurrence, rippling outward, the bullets proving that the borders of the self were porous, the shooter was alone. When my sister calls to tell me I need to make it home, I'm poor and living in a small apartment half a world away in Thailand. When I put the phone against my chest and hold it, I turn to the woman who's now my wife, and the likes of which I know today my children will also have to someday navigate without me. In Jean Raspail's 1973 novel, The Camp of the Saints, brown immigrants band together to overrun the continent. My daughters scream each other's names and sprint across the yard. The weapon heavy in my hands, the kids. So when a girl I used to think I'd marry suggests we work together on a project, I'm afraid. In my memory, I set the rifle down and lay alone beside the book and let the light across my face go forth without the need to name it. For you and of you, I begin. I'm growing in the cold stone of a garden in my basement. And then the poem falls out of me like water. When my youngest daughter reaches for the picture of my dad I keep on a shelf above my records, she asks me what it means to die. The poem prescribes itself its ending, a silent litany of grief. My daughter pauses. Death, I say, is when a person turns they've left behind and live there. It is a place, Oppen writes. Nothing has entered it, nothing has left. The depth of water pours from all its sources. My earliest memory is a dream in which my father disappears into a painting of a ring of children holding hands that used to decorate my bedroom. In it, I'm alone and screaming out his name. When I wake up, the scream remains, but this time he's sitting in the room beside me and saying it's okay. Everything will be okay. Strangely, some 30-odd years later, these same words promising my safety are the last I'll hear him speak. I cannot, even now, altogether disengage myself, Oppen writes. I picked the book up off the ground and carried it. As versions of white replacement theory overrun the continent, my daughter climbs into my lap, puts her head against my chest and says, my dad's awake in there and wants to know if he can visit us in summer. When I can't write a poem, I feel alone in a world of listening. The names of the dead, according to their faces, blur into the general onslaught of the news and disappear. I too, like you, am guilty of forgetting. And the passing of the great race, Madison Grant posits that genetic dissolution will cause the West to fall. Every night, my daughter puts her face against my cheek and whispers in my ear. Rome begins to burn a second time. The ghost of Athens, all of Alexandria. The book is lighter now and larger. Because my dad will never meet my kids, I'm trying to remember him when he was young. But the older that I get, the more the form I apprehend appears increasingly transparent, his language failing him a day before his body does. I want to live forever so that my kids will never need to write a poem like this, but so does everyone, I think, and so my hope is dumb. My daughter kisses me, and I promise silently inside myself that I'll remember the weight her face exerts against my own, the quiet pressure of her mouth, a kind of music moving through me, blooming. In the garden of my memory, I guard the growing darkness of my grave and drag a branch across the wild grass and sing. My singing ceases. In the room, my shoulder slumps against his deathbed. I have not and never did have any motive but to achieve clarity, writes Oppen. My children sleeping in the other room appear to me the reason there is bonds of the singular. When he met my mother, I wonder if my dad imagined me. If at some point, and only for a moment, I existed long before my body did. A single candle flickers near a picture of my father on an altar. The book I shot is now alive in this book. The light of the pages packed against each other exposes the new day. Thank you all for listening.
That was lovely and really thought-provoking. Can't wait for our conversation afterwards. But now I'm gonna bring you Michael Bazzett, including The Echo Chamber on Milkweed editions and the forthcoming The Morphologist, also on Milkweed. It's not coming out till 2026. So and also a verse translation of the creation epic of the Maya. I don't know if I'll pronounce this right, but the Popol Vuh on Milkweed, named by the New York Times as one of the best poetry books of 2018. Recipient of an NEA fellowship in poetry, his writing has appeared in Plowshares, Threepenny, 32 poems, Paris Review, the London Magazine, The Nation, and The Sun.
Thank you, Nina. It's really, really lovely to be here. What a joy it's been to hear everyone read poems. And Nick, I cannot wait to go get that book. I might be kinder. I think I might just use a bow and arrow in your book, or maybe some bottle rockets just out in a field. A shotgun might be a bit much for me. But I'm going to start with some translations, and how perfect that didn't realize when we scheduled this, but that today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and Humberto Acabal wrote in Quiche Maya and translated himself into Spanish. He is a Maya poet. He was fond of pointing out that Quiche does not actually have a word for poet. He called himself a singer. That was the word. And this book is kind of a companion of his books. I'll start with a poem called Today. Today I woke up outside of me and went out to find myself. I traveled roads and paths until I found me, sitting on a mossy ledge at the foot of a cypress, chatting with the fog and trying to forget what I could not. At my feet, leaves, nothing but leaves. One thing I'll let you know about Akabal's poems is some of them are very short. Blink and you miss them. They're the size of postage stamps. I spent about 4 years, ended up translating about 200 poems, about 130 of which made it into the book. But it was a really delightful project just to get inside his sensibility. He wrote very much on behalf of Indigenous peoples. He has a wonderful sense of humor. There's a profound connection to land in his work. And I'll just let you get to know him through his poetry. In this next one, there's a quiche word, a yagual, which is like a woven mat that women would put together just on the spot when they're doing laundry to put underneath their knees and then just discard it once they were done. Since it doesn't really exist in any other language and is very located to place, I didn't translate it, attempt to bring it over into English. The river. Kneeling on a yagual, bent over a stone, my mother washes and washes and washes. My little sister sleeps in a basket covered in willow leaves. Me? I'm sitting on piled straw, watching how the water leaves and how the river stays. My wings. I was flapping my wings and looking at the sky. My mother laughed. We stood on the edge of a ravine. I was waiting for the moment to leap into flight. This one is called Apprentice. It's in those all of a suddens that the urge to write comes, not because I suddenly know how, but because it's in the doing and the undoing that I learn this trade, and in the end, something stays with me. The hills, the ridges, the ravines, the old towns all hold enchanting secrets. Hence my wish to take them out for a stroll on these sheets of paper. And this beautiful work must be done as a side job, as much as that hurts, because I don't have the time I'd like. I work at other things to make a living. My words hold the dampness of rain, the tears of the morning dew, and it cannot be otherwise, because they were brought down from the mountain. Blue. When I was little, thirst burned my throat, until one night I dreamed my hands opened a hole in the ground near an old bridge, and a spring came gushing, clean, flowing clear. I cupped my hands and drank. It quenched my thirst, not the water, the color. Night. Dark night, darker than dark, and smelling of rain. On nights like this, no one knows where earth ends and the sky begins. Prayer. In church, the only prayer you hear comes from the trees they turn into pews. I love that one. The creaking of the trees. Leaves. I like to hear the leaves singing green at sunrise. So tender, so fragrant. And the sad yellow silence of dying afternoons hurts. Branches break and fall. And for what? To become dirt. Flowers. Roots send flowers to tell us what Earth is like on the inside. And flowers fade, they die, because out here, life is shit. Stones. It's not that stones are mute. They just keep quiet. Two eyes. And he translated himself into Spanish. So I'll just read I'll read them side by side. Dos ojos. El cielo tiene dos ojos. No puede ver con los dos a la vez. Se eclipsan. Two eyes. The sky has two eyes, but can't look through both at once without one eclipsing the other. The fire. The fire crouches. He eases the log's sadness by singing his burning song. The log listens, so consumed, he forgets he was ever a tree. You can sort of sense there's a little arc of innocence to experience here. The romances start to come now. That's the marriage, more of a political sensibility, the second half of the book. Rupture. Your silence exploded and awakened the madman sleeping in my brain. I started looking for you down every dead-end road. They tell me you turned into flowers. They tell me you turned into honey. It's your fault I think I'm a bee. I took your name out of my head. I took your name out of my head and left it lost in the hills. The wind picked it up and made its way into the canyons. I began forgetting when suddenly the wind struck the cliffs and the echo resounded. The rain began to sing and your name came back to me, crying. A few more. Downpour. The downpour is a mirror. In one violent cloudburst, the storm breaks, and in the broken rain, our homeland sees its shattered face. The sun. The sun slips between the roof tiles, bound and determined to see what's happening inside our little houses, and he goes pale on seeing he only sheds light on our poverty. Wild. I'm wild, resistant to any music beyond what's in my ears. There's a mountain in my head. I hear only birdsong and the cries of animals. It's a slightly longer one called The Old Song of the Blood. This was a very important poem to me in helping shape this collection because he talks about translating. He talks about writing in Spanish and moving over into that. And I think all writing on a certain level is translation. We have this tangle of, experience and emotion that has to somehow make its way into language. He writes about it very beautifully. The Old Song of the Blood. My mother's milk fed me no Castilian when I came into this world. My language was born among trees. It holds the taste of earth. My ancestors' tongue is my home. And if I use this language that is not mine, I do it as someone using a new key to open another door and enter another world, where words have other voices, a different way of feeling the earth. This language holds the memory of pain, and I speak it without fear or shame because it was paid for with the blood of my ancestors. In this new language, I show the flowers of my song, bring the taste of other sorrows, the shades of different joys. This tongue is just one more key for singing the old song of the blood. Finally, walking backwards. Walking backwards. Every now and then, I turn and start walking backwards. It's my way of remembering. If I only ever walked forward, then I could tell you what forgetting is. How it's spelled. He's a marvelous. It was such a joy to spend 4 years living inside of his work. And it was, as you can imagine, it certainly impacted my work too. So this is a poem that will be in the Morphologist. I'll switch to my poems now for just a few minutes here. And this is after Umberto Acabal. It's called One Night. There. What is that glinting up there in the dark? Bees, she said. Every night since, my eyes have eaten honey. Now I am older, and sleep some droning that tells of flowers turning into butterflies, turning into fire. And I wake to my mother telling me that white foam is how the wave breaks into laughter. Imagine crossing all that sea just to topple. Now her work has ended, and the earth holds her, close, as she dreams grass into green hair. Pleasure to listen to this open mic, and this kind of overlaps both with Patrick's brother and losing his brother and how his brother revisits him, but also Caroline, your unusual package. I lost my sister last year. No, actually almost 2 years now. And this too will be in the Morphologist. It's called A Few Weeks Later. A few weeks later, the day before your lungs quit, the hospice worker asked if you had chosen what to wear afterward to the crematorium. And you said the blue dress, the sleeveless one. I imagine it might get hot in there. And no shoes with crepe soles. They melt. And then you looked at me and said, don't you dare. Not a word about lost souls. No puns. A few days after the funeral, I understood the urge to Google these things. You want to know what it's like, the gas jets, the temperature, how ash turns fine as flour and can be carried for miles on the wind. It's for my dog. A confession. When my dog started rewriting my poems, they got better. They suddenly possessed the ineffable whiff of multivalent scents, milked from the breeze by a wet, black nose. The ear-flopping joy of open car windows. The quivering willingness to lick the ones you barely know, but sense that you might one day love. The squirrel imagery grew more pungent, more necessary. The piercing musk of unbathed human flesh rose sharp as wine intermingled with uncured salami, and when the pages closed at last, you only had to follow the circle of your own steps before collapsing into an untroubled sleep. Just a couple more. was thinking about this. I love that idea of translation, Nick, in terms of what you did and how far it went out there. I once was invited, this was interesting, as a visiting writer to a sculpture class at St. Olaf, and they were translating poems into something three-dimensional. That was the only requirement. It couldn't be language, so they had to come up with an amalgam in some way. And they were talking about monuments and memory and how things get remembered. And there was something about just being a fly on the wall in that scenario. I heard the word remember very differently, and how etymologically its opposite would be dismember. And then if you remember something, it's to make it whole, it's to put it back together again. And so I was thinking about this poem in the context of that. It's and how writing can remember, it can make things whole again. It can resuscitate people, for a while. It's called The Revisionist. When I learned I could draw a bullet back out of the body, and the ragged tunnel of its passage would fuse closed, things changed. For instance, I found I would never lack for work. At funerals, I now wait for someone to say, I would give anything to bring him back. Then I offer my services and strike the deal. Everybody thinks at first that time has somehow been reversed, but all my clients remember getting shot. It's not a thing easily forgot. The sentence of the body is left punctuated by the mark. So now I make a living by turning what seemed to be a period of permanent darkness into the friendly pause of a comma. All right, and we'll do two more. Yeah, that's what we'll do. One's called It's About Time. It's about time. I'd rather let roots slip between my ribs and knit these bones into the black soil to keep them still and ease what restlessness might remain, he said, matter-of-factly, the day after he died, and we asked about disposing of the body. A bee came crawling from his beard. It's odd, he continued, how customs of land ownership inspired us to create an industrial version of what used to be called hell. Just torch us down to cinder, into powder fine as flour, then put it in a vase that's called an urn. Or earn enough, and you can buy a plot of grass and put a stone over your head that says, tomorrow neither comes, nor goes, nor stays. All right, and we'll end with something perhaps a touch more light. It's called Let's Walk the Fields. I wrote it for all the poets out there. In the Brady Bunch grid. Oh, you gotta love Zoom, yes? Let's walk the fields, where wind moves through the tall grass in patterns that in no way resemble invisible fingers combing tawny hair. Let's look up at the early moon hanging in a way that could not plausibly remind us of the flattened head of a galvanized nail catching white light on a pale blue wall. Let's open our rucksack and find the green bottle that beads with condensation as we draw it out into the air, a vino verde that could not with any degree of accuracy be said to echo the mineral notes of cider from a tin cup along a red dirt road in the waning heat of October. Yes, let's walk the fields and merely feel the wind, glance at the dead rock of the moon, take long pulls of wine straight from that hard glass mouth, knowing anything else would be a folly not worth imagining. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
What a pleasure, both of you. There's such a kind of a quiet in both of your work. Just kind of something hallowed. Just to let you know what's happening, we're about to pin the three of us together so we can talk. We don't have a lot of time. So I am going to, well, first I want to let you know that I've seen notes to the effect that some people have already started buying your books, which is not something I see a lot of. People probably do, but they don't say it. It's nice to know. We don't have as much time as I would like. So I want to ask you both to think about a question you might want to ask of each other. And before we get there, you were both talking a little bit about what is necessary. And I'd like to just ask you both, what do you find necessary in your writing? And I think I mean, maybe, what tugs you, or what do you feel driven towards in your work? And what has that feeling of being essential?
It's a good question.
The hard question.
That's a good question.
Well, I'll quote a Umberto poem that I've thought about a lot. I actually was thinking about it a little bit when Nick was reading, and it's just called I Speak. It's one of his very short ones. He said, I speak to shut the mouth of silence. And silence is such a it's crucial to his work, that idea that stones aren't mute, they're just holding their silence, And I think that for me, at least, that silence is a really, or maybe the unsaid might be a better way to put it. I feel like words are always hanging in the air, and trying to find form and to sort of draw that out, what's invisible, what's unsaid. It seems like all the important things in the world are, you can't actually bring someone a bucket full of love. You can't see courage. You can just see its evidence. You can't see, anything that, really matters. So we come up with words to name them. We come up with images to see them. And I guess that's the part of writing that I find fascinating. Like without the hollow of the bell, which I think of as like the white space around the poem. Poems live inside of a fair amount of silence. It's like they don't use the whole page. And I think that's partially why I'm drawn to it as a form. And it keeps me going, I guess, because you can't actually get good at it, or get good enough at it. You know what I mean? You're always trying to write that next poem too. If everything's translation, that one thing I've really learned as a translator very much is you always know the imperfections of the poem. There's this idea of something beautiful humming out there, and then you do the best job you can, knowing that it's going to be imperfect. Yeah.
I think I'd like to echo that, maybe add to it, and maybe anything that I add to it is just a way of saying that differently. Like when Michael's talking about silence and wanting to bring that into the poem, I think I would like to add, maybe right next to that silence or adjacent to that silence, is like a sense of selflessness. Like Keats in his letters says that the poet has no self. Most of the writers who are really, really influential to me and whose work matters and makes sense to me all kind of echo that sentiment in some way. And so I think a question I'm always asking myself when I'm writing is like, what are the strategies that I have available to me as a poet to kind of make the self silent for the sake of the subject or for the sake of the language. Like I think like one thing that's maybe especially unique to poets is like a concern for music. Like you mentioned that he didn't consider himself a poet. He considered himself a singer, and I think what that means is that the music takes precedent. Like the music decides. Like Richard Hugo had this idea. Like the music, it decides what the next word is going to be because the next word has to musically make sense and resonate and not rhyme necessarily, but like has to
Yeah.
musically fit with the other words in the poem. And so that's the deciding. That's the deciding mechanism. What I want to say, what my ideas about this subject are are secondary to music. And so like that to me is a way to kind of like I put the like I let the muse or I let the muse decide, right? Like it's not, I'm trying to like
Yeah.
turn myself off and make myself as quiet as possible, which is maybe impossible ultimately, but you can, I think as poets we have all these tools that can kind of help us kind of make the attempt at the
Yeah.
very least.
Yeah. Been thinking a lot lately that we don't really write poems as much as listen for them.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me, what you're saying. You know, that idea of wanting to be a conduit to something, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a really old idea. I mean, like muse. I mean, the metaphor of the muse is a petition for possession, right? It's a petition to be replaced and to have yourself turned off and taken over by something outside of yourself. And that's where, you know, in the good old days, that's where art came from. It was
Yeah.
this thing
Yeah.
that happened when the self turned silent and this thing other than you took over.
Yeah.
It related to that is just the idea of being in service of,
Yeah.
and you're both, I'm seeing you both as very much in service of what different things call you, but Michael, where that's really evident for you is just seeing, well, certainly in translation, you're in service of, but as I watched you read, it was like you are in love with him. And it's
Yeah.
just evident.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I am. I mean, I think what you're trying to recreate, and what was really interesting about that idea of being in service to it is what I'm trying to recreate is how the poem makes me feel and how it lands as much as I am trying to recreate the poem. He has a very colloquial Spanish that he uses. And I mean, I have a working knowledge of Quiche just because that's the language that Popol Vuh was in. And that translation project was 8 years long, but I can't read it. I'm not fluent in it, so I'm already dealing with an echo of the poem that he wrote. And the times when I sometimes had a naughty problem would go back and look at the Quiche and figure it out with the lexicon. He sometimes was pretty loose in the way that he translated himself, which was really interesting because it kind of gives a sort of permission to be in service. I had this saying that would percolate underneath. I was saying, translate the poem, not the words. It's like you're in service to the poem, not the words. It's like and obviously that can be probably really problematic in the wrong hands, but at least for this particular project, and given the fact that there's already two versions out there, I think that idea of sort of being in service and listening to the poem, thinking, what does it want? What does it need? Is yeah, much more become a part of my process, I think.
And I think,
Yeah.
Michael, that's the question I wanted to ask you is like, how, and maybe, I don't know if you can answer it, but maybe like to the degree that that experience like has changed you as a writer, like, is there a way that you can quantify that or define like how, like, I'm just trying to imagine like spending that much time in someone else's language, and I'm trying to wonder like what would I come out the other side of that, like how would I emerge from that, and I'm just curious if you have any sense of how you've emerged from it.
Well, I didn't get an MFA, so I didn't I had one undergraduate creative writing class because that's all they offered. And I had kids early enough that I was certainly intrigued by it. My first book didn't come out till I was 48. And I'd already done the full Popol Vuh translation at that point, kind of on my own. It was just a crazy project that I started doing in small pieces, and I grew and grew and grew. But I think 12 years in total on sort of 2 book-length translations. The technical stuff that it taught me, almost like I started translating for the very first time before either one. When I was living in Mexico, I was 41. I was trying to learn Spanish, and it was just I spoke French. I'm easy. I already know one language, and my 42-year-old brain was like, "No, it's not true." And so I had a book of Neruda in Spanish, and I would do like 4 lines a morning, and the house didn't even have Wi-Fi. This was in San Miguel, and Saturday morning, I go down to the Biblioteca Publica and see how I done, because Neruda's been translated, 40 times. And it just the moves that you learn, the technical things, thinking about inversions, different ways to deal with music, the folks that tried to hold the rhyme, the folks that let go of it, and things like that. It was actually probably get an MFA of sorts. I just did it through a very different kind of arcane process.
Yeah.
By like candlelight, I probably should have been wearing a robe or something. But at the end of the day, I look back on that, and that's what it's just on my process. And the fact that I play around a lot. I mean, my analog is, I say, like, it was like this, to sort of go in and have that puzzle thing. And so I find I still do that all the time. And I don't know how common it is. I've certainly shared this with some poet friends. Who think it's weird, but I'll blow my poems up. I'll do them without lineation. I'll do them in syllabics. So some of my poems have like literally 37 versions to them. And I'm just the same. And then finally they'll be like, oh, look, it's wearing the right clothes. You're like, so you send it off to school.
Well, I'm going to put everybody on notice that when it's 8:58, but I want to give some time for Michael, your question of Nick, and for Nick to respond to that.
I'm really fascinated by this, just the book shooting anecdotes that you thought of and didn't choose, and like thinking about that as an act of translation. I mean, I'm giving like a craft talk on translation like in 2 weeks, so I've been thinking about it a ton. But think about that as an act of I love the image of, like, obviously the book opening 2 wings, and I was wondering if when you shot it, did you ever go up and see which poems the buckshot chose? Like, were you going up and like looking at different iterations of it?
Yeah, I would go up and like shoot it, and then go up and look at it and be like, oh, that's cool, and then go do it again a couple more times, and then go look just to see, like, because you're at some distance from it, so it's kind of hard to see what's happening, or sometimes you have to go like set it, get knocked over, and you have to go set it up again and stuff. As far as like my thinking behind it, I don't know that it was that complicated, that there was that much thought that went into it. On some level, I was like, oh, it'll be fun. Like, it'll be fun to like go shoot. Because I grew up in Wisconsin, and I grew up like with guns, like a lot of people do in Wisconsin, and I grew up shooting. Like my uncle was a hunter, and my dad was a hunter when he was younger, but he had gone he was one of those hunters that like hunted when he was young, but then eventually just liked shooting, and didn't really care about shooting animals anymore. Like, he mostly just wanted like he liked the craft of it, and he liked being out in nature. So I think on some level, I just thought, oh, this would be fun. But I think my original thought though was like, I was thinking something along the lines that you said, like when you're saying that like all writing is translation, like you're pointing to this way where like there's something that can't be said, and then we have to like turn that nothingness into language. And so I think really my only idea was like, well, what would it mean to translate a book back into the place that it came from? Like, what activity would speak to kind of translating a book back into its original language, which is absence. And I think,
Nick, what did you do then? What did you hand in?
I just handed in the actual book,
yeah,
and like what was left of it.
What was left, or?
Oh, I think it's like I did like some things where I was like, I took the words that were left on pages and like put them together and like made little poems out of them. But though that wasn't what was interesting. Like that was a part of my original idea, but then I tried it and that wasn't, nothing lasted from that part of it. What was interesting was just the book itself, and the experience of it was what was interesting.
Can I show you a quick image? Is it possible for me to screen share, Nina? This is a little uncanny because I hadn't heard anything about this, but so here is, what do I do? Just click on it? Yeah, share. This is the cover to my okay, can folks see this? My, I guess it was my, second collection with milkweed. Did I just unshare it, or do you guys?
I can see it.
We got it? Okay, yeah, here we go. And it's a photo by Alex South. And like people all the time when it's extremely nicely produced on the cover. You can see the shadows, but where they block out the actual face, but it's a self-portrait. And then he took it to, the target range, and people will come up and actually want to like put their fingers in the hole, and then they realize it's actually 2D, which is kind of interesting. So I mean, when you started describing this, I had this weird, Kismet zeitgeist sort of echo, thinking about him. I love his work. He's a photographer I really love, and how interesting that he was sort of interrogating the self in that way. So something, just kind of a weird intersection. Yeah.
Well, another intersection being the idea of, well, anything ekphrastic is really translating that piece of work into this other piece of work.
Because yeah, I mean there's a lot of poems or parts of poems about that experience that that's kind of a thing that gets threaded throughout the book is little images of the book getting shot and stuff, like, so it lived again, like, it turned into something else. It took years,
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, this is only the beginning of a conversation that I suspect that you both will want to continue, and I want to be there when you do, because this is just so kind of mind-blowing. It's kind of like a book being blown up with, of course, a shotgun.
Thanks for having us, Nina. It really was lovely. It was a joy to read with you, Nick, and
yeah, you
other readers as well. It was, and we're not that far apart. So
I'm gonna try to make it up to Minneapolis. I have a bunch of friends up north up there, so I think at some point I'm gonna try to do a reading for this book up in Minneapolis at some point. So I'll let you know.
Yeah, please do. I'm assuming you got my email from Nina.
Yeah.
I'll email you both. To our audience, to our open mic, and to Al and Bill, who make this happen with me, and to both of you, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, absolutely lovely.
Bye.